Hi, my name's Nissa. I'm a solicitor at Law & Co Solicitors, and today we're discussing who really benefits from divorce. Is it the husband? Is it the wife? Is it the children? Or does the biggest winner turn out to be the government? So I guess today we're talking about a really controversial topic, individuals versus the state. Who benefits most financially from divorce? So first, I'd like to introduce Mohsin Tolga, who I'm sure you're all very familiar with. He's a solicitor, principal director at Law & Co Solicitors. He has over 19 years of experience. He's well accustomed to dealing with divorce and financial matters, and he represents very often in family proceedings at court as well. So I think there's a fact that I want to share with you initially that maybe our viewers don't know, and maybe you won't realize that the figures are in fact this high. But in 2023, there were over 102,000 divorces in England and Wales. That's nearly 300 divorces in one single day. So bearing that in mind, Mohsin, let's discuss one basic question first. Does divorce actually create wealth?
Answer is no. It usually divides existing wealth while increasing living cost for both parties. For example, if parties were sharing one household, now they need two houses, two cars, which increases expense.
So can you explain to us who actually pays for the divorce process?
Normally clients, unless they have legal aid is funded by government, and there are we haven't got legal aid, but it's mostly deducted from assets, or clients they fund themselves.
Can you tell us what sort of person who's paying privately for your services, or generally for the divorce process, what sort of fees they can come up against?
It depends on the value of the estate. If there are more assets, overseas properties, pensions, shares. If you're talking about a complex matter, then legal fees are normally high. If divorce is straightforward, then fees can be low. So fees are subject to whether divorce is complex or straightforward.
Yeah, I think there's an important somewhat distinction to be made as well, that one thing is the divorce process. So that's the actual act of getting divorced from your husband or spouse or partner, and then the other part of that process is the financial proceedings. I mean, there's a lot of couples who don't have any assets, and therefore their divorce is very much a bit more of a straightforward procedure. But I think, as Mohsin has already touched on, where you have several assets, the negotiation process or the decision of who gets what can often become very complex, and quite often it's quite contentious because parties often feel like, I'm entitled to this and I'm entitled to that. And I think there's a lot of spouses as well who give up a lot in a marriage. One spouse is maybe focused on career, the other spouse is maybe focused more on the home. So there's a lot of arguments to be had in relation to that. But I think we're slightly digressing from our topic, but I want to bring us back to whether the state actually benefits financially from a divorce.
State may receive revenue from, say for example, if matrimonial property is sold, then the buyer will be paying stamp duty, it's subject to first time buyer, second time buyer, can be high, can be low. Spouses are buying their own properties, they may be liable with stamp duty. In addition, so this is financial activity, and no doubt state is benefiting from it.
Yeah, I think one of the other things you haven't mentioned is the fact that even on a day-to-day basis, in terms of dealing with the case, there's often court fees involved, valuation fees, things like that, loads of things that are associated immediately with the actual divorce process.
The one thing, the state may lose on capital gain tax, because there is exemption between, spouses. Even if you transfer property, I'm not giving tax advice, this is general conversation, I'm not tax advisor, but what I'm saying is, even if you transfer property to your children, that is subject to capital gain tax, but this is exception. So other than that, state is still making money.
Yeah, I think obviously we're focusing a lot on the actual physical assets that might be part of a marriage, but one of the things that I think a lot of clients don't think about is their pension, and that's actually considered an asset when you come to divorce. And like I said, a lot of clients don't actually realize that, but it can be quite a valuable asset of the marriage. So is there something that you want to say about that?
Pension is an extremely important part of financial settlement, and pension requires expert valuation. expert advice, and which is subject to fees, legal fees and expenses.
And then I think another thing that clients don't often think about is their overseas assets, because obviously their main residence is often in England and Wales, and they may have a holiday home somewhere or something like that. So again, that's not really their primary consideration, but it does form part of the divorce financial proceedings. So again, is there something that you want to say about the overseas assets as well?
Overseas asset, if overseas asset is part of matrimonial assets, then you may require overseas lawyers because asset is in a different situation, like jurisdiction. You need to deal with sale, agents, valuation. It could be anything.
So, who loses when the assets are in fact limited? So we've talked about when you have quite a few assets, and we're talking about overseas assets, pensions, things like that. However, who actually loses when your assets are quite limited? So you might only have one home, you might not have a lot of wealth between you as partners.
Okay, I understand your question. Parties are living in matrimonial home. House is sold and sale proceeds are divided either equally or, it depend on needs, parties' needs. However, sale proceeds may not be sufficient to purchase properties, for each spouse. Therefore, they lost their house, their only house. However, they're unable to complete or purchase a decent house for themselves.
Yeah, I think off the back of that, a lot of, going back to what I said earlier, that sometimes there's a spouse in the relationship who hasn't worked for a number of years, who's dedicated their time and effort to the marriage, to their children, etc. So their mortgage raising capacity ends up being quite low. And so it becomes a real financial issue between the parties. And I think the good thing about our court system is that the court actually considers the needs of the party rather than anything else. That's the paramount consideration. Children of the family, the needs, and who needs what, and based on that, how the assets or how things should be divided to bring a balance between both of them. But again, in reality, that doesn't necessarily resolve the financial strain that both parties feel. Is the financial cost the biggest issue? Not
necessarily. Emotional impact can be far greater in relation to children and parties themselves. So it's not necessary that though financial impact is huge, but emotional can be more difficult.
So do professionals benefit, would you say?
I can't say that professionals, they provide services, they try and settle it. And let me tell you, early settlement is better in many situations. It will save time, cost, stress, and parties can move on in a timely fashion.
Yeah. It's an ultimate balance between finance and emotional. They're both considerations to be made in a divorce process. But going back to our original question, do you think the state also benefits from a divorce?
State is always a winner. Next question.
So, last question, who really wins in a divorce?
Oh, that's like the debate. However, divorce may provide a fresh start, but financially and emotionally, many would say nobody truly wins. So it's a sad situation. So we can't say who wins, but
yeah. I think we've focused a lot on the finances in this debate, but obviously there's other considerations in a divorce, and I am sure each party who unfortunately might be going through this will consider all everything in the round, and we're not encouraging one way or the other, but it's been interesting talking to you, Mohsin.
Thank you, Nisa.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.